I want to talk to you today about Abraham Kuyper, a church leader, founder of a newspaper, founder of a political party, founder of a university, prime minister of the Netherlands from 1901 to 1905, described by one of his biographers as God's Renaissance man. I want to explore three ideas that are fundamental to Kuyper's thought. Those three ideas are sphere sovereignty, anti-revolution, and common grace. Let's begin with the first of those three. For Kuyper, there is only one absolute sovereign, only one to whom all authority on heaven and earth has been given, Jesus Christ. There's not one square inch in the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is Lord of all, does not exclaim, mine. All earthly authorities are subject to the rule of Christ, and their authority is limited in scope and function. Looking back to the book of Genesis, Kuyper saw that parents have a responsibility to care for, educate, and raise their children, which is prior to the existence of government. Echoing Peter and John's words to the Sanhedrin in Acts chapter 5, verse 29, we must obey God rather than human beings, Kuyper was clear that the church has a responsibility to proclaim and live out the gospel with which government ought not to interfere. In short, the family and the church have their own authority given directly by God and separate from the authority given to government. From these biblical ideas, Kuyper reasoned by analogy that there were other spheres in society whose institutions had their own proper authority. Education has its schools and universities, health, its hospitals, commerce, its businesses, journalism, its newspapers, science, its institutes and laboratories. The arts have their concert halls, libraries, theatres, and museums. There are different goods which human beings have been given to pursue. The goods of love and learning and health and economic flourishing, communication, discovery, culture, faith, and order. And a society is healthy when the institutions in each of these spheres are given the liberty to pursue these goods in an appropriate way. Kuyper saw clearly the danger of an overpowerful government, the absolute state. Whether a personality cult like Louis XIV or Napoleon of France, a militarist collective like Bismarck's Prussia, or a revolutionary republic like the one established by the French Revolution in 1792. Kuyper's idea of sphere sovereignty limits and clarifies the role of government. The goods which government exists to pursue are those of order and justice. Government is to provide a framework for the ordinary interaction of different social spheres and their institutions. Government is to regulate the institutions operating in their different spheres, and government is to protect the weak who may be abused in any particular sphere. The idea of sovereignty, I think, is a rhetorical device used by Kuyper to highlight the extent to which there is an autonomy to each of the different spheres which ought to be respected unless it is obviously being abused. Kuyper's second idea is anti-revolution. Born in 1837, Abraham Kuyper grew up in the shadow of the French Revolution and Napoleon's conquest of mainland Europe. He was only 10 when the 1848 era of revolutions began. The Netherlands was just one of 50 polities affected by a wave of political change, more dramatic and widespread than that of the Arab Spring of 2010 to 2012. The outcome of the 1848 revolution in the Netherlands was the establishment of representative democracy, but in many other places, the revolutions were suppressed at the cost of tens of thousands of lives. When Kuyper went into politics, he called his party the AntiRevolutionary Party. Commentators have sometimes criticized his choice of name, suggesting he's committed the besetting sin affecting Christian involvement in politics, that of declaring most clearly what it is that we are against, rather than presenting a positive vision of what we stand for. The criticism is partially unfair. Through the choice of name, Kuyper was sending a signal that his party would be progressive, but that it believed in the importance of change being gradual and organic, a development from existing traditions rather than a sudden violent disruption and dislocation of what had gone before. Like his contemporaries in Victorian England, Kuyper recognized that the world was changing radically. Though he was deeply concerned to maintain Reformed orthodoxy, his vision for society was progressive, seeking to identify a framework of principles within which technological and societal development could be shaped for good. Kuyper's view of politics was similar to that of Edmund Burke. Politics is an art in which lawmakers whose judgment is fallible attempt to make rules to govern the behavior of a people who are fallible. Revolutions are destructive because their ideological justification is hubristic, the fatal assumption that we, the revolutionaries, know best and can govern perfectly. Kuyper's fallibilism is of a piece with his idea of sphere sovereignty. Because it is not safe for any human being or group of human beings to have total sovereignty, God has, in his wisdom, distributed authority among different groups and institutions, in order that these might limit and temper the excesses and failures of each other. Because of the dangers of concentrated power and the dangers of erroneous judgment, laws should optimize liberty of conscience, association, and expression. This form of fallibilist liberalism might therefore be described as limitism because of its strong emphasis on the limitations of government. Kuyper's third big idea is that of common grace. The idea of sphere sovereignty requires that there be limits to law in order that the institutions in their different spheres have freedom to pursue their distinct goals according to their own best judgment. Kuyper's fallibilism acknowledges that no one has all the answers as to what the laws should be or how the different goals of human life are to be pursued. Kuyper's social vision is a pluralist one. It is a live and let live approach in which a nation is united by its commitment to a common set of institutions and to a common framework, rather than to a single overarching social vision. On Kuyper's approach, therefore, politics is the art of finding common ground and forming alliances in order to advance the common good. Some theologians understand God's covenant with Noah in Genesis 9 as God's authorization for post-lapsarian politics. Kuyper drew attention to another feature of that chapter, the rainbow. Kuyper saw the rainbow as the sign of God's grace given to all, regardless of whether they are yet followers of Christ or not. Because our world is God's world, something of what God has created as good for human beings is accessible to everyone. Kuyper called the idea that everyone knows something of how God wants human beings to flourish common grace. Fallibilism means that because of the fall, no one, whether Christian or not, knows God's will fully. Common grace means that despite the fall, no one, whether Christian or not, is wholly ignorant of God's will. As a result, Christians can humbly participate in the making of laws, working with others and learning from others in order to find the optimal solutions to the problems of regulating our common life. So to conclude, laws were for Kuyper rules which promote justice and the common good. Because of God's common grace, all have the capacity to participate in the adoption of God's just laws. Because of the fall, changes in the legal order should be organic developments from existing traditions rather than revolutionary changes. Because God has distributed authority among different institutions, justice is about ordering the interactions between institutions from different spheres, providing a necessary framework of regulation for institutions in their own spheres, and protecting the weak against institutions abusing their authority.